insurrection, it had been clear to everyone who could see the scene, from the Capitol Police battling the mob to literally anyone watching at home, that more law enforcement was needed, and quickly. By 2:30 p.m., the Trump-fueled mob had already breached the Capitol and were inside the building, and members of Congress were cowering in their seats, reaching for their gas masks and taking off their pins. And at 2:30 p.m., there was a conference call between the Capitol Police and Pentagon officials about what to do about this urgent crisis. According to the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard, when the Capitol Police requested assistance from the National Guard on that call, they were denied.
The Army senior leaders did not think that it looked good, it would be a good optic. They further stated that it could incite the crowd.
In written testimony, General Charles Flynn, then Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, who was on that call, wrote, quote, "I never expressed a concern about the visuals, image, or public perception of sending the D.C. National Guard to the U.S. Capitol." While Lieutenant General Walter Pyatt, the director of Army staff, who was also on that call, claimed, quote, "At no point on January 6th did I tell anyone the D.C. National Guard should not deploy directly to the Capitol." Well, Colonel Earl Matthews was serving as the top attorney to the D.C. National Guard on that day, on January 6th. He was also on that call. And he says those two generals are lying. And I don't mean suggest that. In a 36-page memo, Matthews calls both men, quote, "absolute and unmitigated liars," criticized the Pentagon's Inspector General for whitewashing the Army's actions. Specifically, he says General Pyatt's answer that he never said the National Guard should not deploy is, quote, "false and misleading," calls General Charles Flynn's claim he was not concerned with optics, quote, "outright perjury." As Politico reports, the Pentagon is participating in a secret attempt to rewrite the history of the military's response to the Capitol riot. Betsy Woodruff Swan wrote this story for Politico, where she's a national correspondent, and she joins me now. Betsy, first, let's set up the sort of point of controversy and contention in the timeline here and this call, just to go back through this. We've got the 236 Sun requests the National Guard support by verbal request. Flynn and Pyatt recommend for D.C. Guard to stand by. They start drafting a plan for courses of action. But the key point is that in that call, where they're saying, hey, we need people, the National Guard does not get sent. And from the beginning, there's been a question of why not.
There's been a question of why it took so long for National Guard troops to get to the Capitol building and defend the Capitol. The Defense Department's internal watchdog, its Inspector General, released a report earlier this year that was basically exculpatory. It essentially said that the Pentagon did everything that it could have done, that senior Pentagon leaders were doing their best, and that this day, on the whole, looks good for the U.S. military. What we have emerging now is a counter-narrative coming not from the Pentagon, but from the D.C. National Guard, the actual group of troops who were called to respond to the Capitol building. Of course, we've had General Walker's testimony, and now in this new memo that I obtained, we have Colonel Matthews, who was on that 2:30 call, amplifying and adding detail to that testimony. One key point of dissension is, what did these two generals, Flynn and Pyatt, say on the call when the Capitol Police chief was begging them to send in the National Guard as soon as possible? Those two generals have told Congress that they did not oppose immediately sending in the National Guard, while Matthews now says in this document that's been delivered to the January 6th Select Committee that in fact they did. And very importantly, another key piece of detail that Matthews brings here is he describes how everyone in the D.C. National Guard